Hey everyone, my name is Dido and I'm making an online turn-based strategy game called Ancient Warriors. It's been a while since my last devlog update, so let me get straight to the point and show you what I've been doing for the past couple of months. So the first topic I want to talk about is my migration from squares to hexagons. So from the start of the project I knew that using hexagons is generally a better approach compared to squares. Not that squares are bad, but you know, hexagons are cooler. And there are other gameplay reasons why it's kind of better to use hexagons. I'll talk about it later in the video. Initially, I just couldn't do it because I didn't have the skills and was postponing it indefinitely. It turned out it's not that complex to migrate from one to another. There are nice videos that explain it, like for example Quill Creates or Game Dev Guide on YouTube have many useful tutorials, and also there is very deep article from Red Bob Games. I'll put the links to those videos and articles in the description if you want to check them later. But in short, the difference is just a visual representation and a little tweaking of the pathfinding algorithm at the point where it searches for the neighboring tiles. Okay, next thing is map movement cost and daytime tracking. In games like Heroes of Might and Magic or other turn-based strategy games, each player has to wait a while other players take their turn. In my game, I wanted to have shorter game loops. I decided to achieve this by introducing the so-called simultaneous turns. I implemented this by allowing each player to move in parallel while they still have movement points remaining. Of course, you want to limit how much player can move each day. That's why I made it so when you consume all of your movement points, you get exhausted and need to rest. Players can rest by pressing the rest button or by just waiting for the next day to come. If all of the players press the rest button, we fast forward to a new day and all of the movement points are refreshed. Another thing that I think it's important when making a game is giving the player feedback on every action they made. Something that I really like in Hearthstone is how they show what the opponent is doing even when it's not their turn. For example, hovering over some of his cards or inspecting some of mine. That's why I made the unit selection to be visible to the opponent when you have a multiplayer match. Next thing in line is again a visual feedback. Selecting a friendly or enemy unit shows how far you can move a given unit. Allowed moves are displayed in green for friendly units, red for enemy units, and white for friendly units when it's not their turn. Okay, this one is small but quite important. I completely wrote my camera controller script. Now we have better and smoother movement and ability to focus on a unit and rotate the camera around it. I've decided to walk the camera rotation by 90 degrees, but I'm wondering whether or not to allow players to switch back to free camera rotation. Maybe I can make it configurable via game settings. Players are also able to pan the camera by right-clicking and dragging anywhere on the screen. In addition to this, I've decided to also automatically focus the camera on the next unit when its turn comes. In my game, I want to give the player the ability to execute multiple actions during their turn. Like for example, move, attack, use special ability, use inventory item. To achieve this, I've decided to borrow the concept of action points from games like Divinity Original Sin. So now this is one of my core mechanics. Here it's how it works for those of you that haven't faced it before. Each action that is done by the unit requires a certain amount of action points. Like for example, movement requires 1 point, attack requires 1 point, move plus attack requires 2, using an inventory item requires 1 point, using a normal ability requires 1 point, using an ultimate ability requires 3 points. All of the action points and movement points are restored when a new round comes. A new round comes when all of the units from both players have played their turn and are exhausted. In contrast to the majority of turn-based games, where you have an initiative mechanic which determines the order of units based on their speed or initiative value, I wanted in my game to allow the player to choose which unit he wants to play first. You know, similar what you have in classic chess game. When I implemented this, I realized it introduced a problem. The problem was that the player was able to move one unit and then select and move another one. In order to prevent that, I added a unit walking functionality. What this means is that when you select a unit and consume at least one action point, this unit becomes walked and the player can no longer select another unit to play with, not until the unit is exhausted or the turn is over. Okay, I'm really happy with the next one. Do you know how in many games you have mechanics like backstab? You do 50% more damage when attacking an enemy from the back, or for example shield wall. You take 80% reduced damage from ranged attacks when attacked from the front. So if I want this in my game, I need to allow the player to pick a position from where his attack will come. I've spent quite some time figuring out how exactly to implement this, but at the end I've decided that I can just measure the distance between the cursor and the neighboring tiles. So at the end I just pick the closest tile to my mouse position. Something interesting about this feature is that actually this was the reason why I was pushed to migrate from squares to hexagons. Because initially I had trouble implementing this functionality with squares. The reason for that was that the distance to each neighboring tile is not the same for squares as it is for hexagons. Okay, final chapter in this video, attacks and counterattacks. Finally, I've reached the point where I can execute an attack against an enemy unit. Here it is how it should behave. I said should because I'm not 100% ready with it. So first step, player right clicks on enemy unit. Then an attack request is sent to the server. The server validates that the request is allowed and processes it by generating a random damage number and applying it to the enemy. The enemy performs a counterattack. If everything is okay on the server sends a response message back to the clients. Both player clients simulate the attack locally and we are done. Even though this sounds like something extremely basic, I faced multiple challenges while implementing. Like for example, do you know that when you're creating an animation in Unity, you need to create the animation inside the child object in order to prevent usage of global coordinates? Well, yeah, me neither. If you don't do that, your animation will always use a global coordinate system and you won't be able to rotate the direction of the animation with script. Another problem that I still haven't fixed is that you need to wait for your attack and counterattack animations to complete before ending the turn. Otherwise, it just switches the turn and your animation is still playing, which is not good. Alright, this is all the updates I have for now. In the next video, I'll try to talk more about the story and the visuals of the game. There's some interesting stuff there, so don't miss it. If you want, you can also follow me on Twitter for more frequent and small updates. Link in the description below. And don't forget, if you like the video and want to see more, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. So yeah, if you reached this far, thank you guys very much for watching and see you all next time. Cheers!